from Little Green Panda. We also welcome our students and schools that have been signalled a focus on the environment and sustainability and have accepted our invitation today. We have teachers and students from St Leonard's College, Brighton East, Beacons Hill College, Berwick, Kew High School, Salesian College, Sunbury, Mount Lilydale Mercy College, Catholic Regional College, Sydenham, and Templestowe College, and our 2025 Environment Sustainability Award winners, St Monica's College from Epping. We also welcome some special guests. A round of applause, I think. We're going to hear more from those students very soon. It's amazing what they've done. We also welcome some special guests representing the environmental charities that will benefit from the proceeds of the function today. We welcome SecondBite co-founders Ian and Simone Carson, Chief Operating Officer Daniel Moorfield and Amy Stevenson from Expand Foundation. We have a number of guests, visitors and visiting Rotarians from various clubs, including Interact Home Network and the board and founders of the Melbourne Arboretum, Maggie and Hamish McDonald, and our own Reg Smith. Please, a round of applause to welcome everyone. For those of you in the audience that don't know much about Rotary, our organisation has around 1.4 million people who are members, and we share and focus and take responsibility for taking action in our world's most persistent issues. Our 46,000 clubs all around the world work together to promote peace, fight disease, provide clean water, sanitation and hygiene, save mothers and children, support education, grow local economies and protect the environment. This club, Rotary Club of Melbourne, was established in April 1921 and was the first of the Rotary clubs established in Australia. It has over the years been the largest club and certainly made large positive impacts in local, national and international communities. In June 2020, Rotary Melbourne launched a new initiative to become a leader in environmental sustainability. Led by members Gary Fowler and Peter Berg, it was identified that environmental sustainability was likely to become a seventh area of focus for Rotary International. The board endorsed a committee to championing the environment, and environmental awards, actions for the environment and awareness, and an annual environmental lunch has evolved. I would now like to call on Barbara Eurondis from our Environment Award Committee to make this year's presentation. Whilst Barbara makes her way up, I want to acknowledge and thank the committee for their efforts in administering this award. From contacting the state's secondary schools, reviewing and judging the many applications, it's been a lot of work, but it's in such a great cause. So I'll now pass over to Barbara.
Thank you, Catherine. In 2021, Melbourne Rotary ran its inaugural environmental awards, focusing on improving ecological sustainability. As Catherine mentioned, previous awards included Claire Moore from Sweet Justice, and Claire is here today, Phoebe Gardner and Alex Arnold from Bardi, Beth Mandel and Emily Jarvin, who are the sustainability captains from the Star of the Sea for their project on fast fashion, and special commendation awards to Manon Bouchamp Trudeau from Little Green Panda, who I believe is also here today. Again this year, the focus of the award has been on tomorrow's leaders. The award is inspired by the need to take action to support the environment, being one of Rotary's 7 areas of focus. This year's award is focused on excellence in the environmental sustainability in secondary school students, and especially those who have made a contribution to their community. So the 2025 award criteria is for a group of secondary school students who have created or developed a project that demonstrates leadership in sustainability and community engagement. So the purpose of the award is to inspire tomorrow's leaders to focus on environmental sustainability, demonstrate innovation and ideas, and create engagement to inspire other school students. The award is for $3,000. It's a grant to be paid to the school, and it is to be spent on an environmental and sustainability project. All secondary school students in metropolitan Melbourne were invited to submit an application. In fact, all the applications this year did address all the criteria for the award. We are pleased that we received 13 applications, all of them outstanding. So the selection panel had quite a job to actually select which one we were going to recognise with the award. So all students who have made a submission received participation certificates, and 5 students have received special commendation certificates for their outstanding achievements. Those students are from MacKillop College in Werribee, Isabella Scott and Kate Jackson, and I'm not sure that they've made it today. You have, you made it, okay. Sierra Woolhouse and Amelia Taylor from St Leonard's College in Brighton East. And we've also a special Charlotte Arndt from Beacons Hill College in Berwick, who has received a special commendation but has also been nominated for a Community Services Award for her project. So we congratulate Charlotte as well. However, before we present the award, I have some news to share. Firstly, I would like to announce that from today's lunch, Melbourne Rotary has partnered with One Seed. I've got to say that properly, otherwise it comes out wrong. To purchase 2.1 kilograms of CO2 emissions per person. So you can, if you have a look on your menu, it's actually got a breakdown of how those CO2 emissions are created by your lunch. So our total emissions last year were offset by purchasing 14 certified carbon social credits from With One Seed. And we are currently developing a project for Rotary to support farmers who are maintaining trees as part of a major program to plant 10 million trees over 10 years in Timor-Leste. This is a major economic development project which will ultimately be financed by the sale of carbon credits based on the proven With One Seed model. With that, I would like to call Simone Carson, CEO of SecondBite, to give us a little presentation. Where is Simone? Thank you, Simone.
Thanks, Barbara. Thank you, Barbara, and President Catherine, and the amazing members of Melbourne Rotary for including myself and Ian Carson, who are co-founders of SecondBite, and Daniel Moorfield, SecondBite Fair Shares CEO. You've got a very exciting and very important announcement to make, so I'll be quite brief. Every year, 2.5 million tonnes of food is wasted by Australian households, and 7.6 million tonnes across the food system around our country will end up in landfill. Most of that food is edible. At the same time, many Australians are making tough decisions about buying food or purchasing their medication, putting petrol in their cars, paying their bills. Each day, I got this figure from our CEO over there. Each day, SecondBite distributes about 68,000 kilograms of food that would have ended up in landfill, and delivers it for free nationally to over 1,000 charity partners. Now, these charities, such as the Salvation Army in Bourke Street or St Mary's House of Welcome in Fitzroy, provide food programs. Most use the food as a way of connection, of providing a lot more than calories. They understand that the sharing of a meal can provide moments of hope and of joy, a sense that someone cares. Now, SecondBite began its journey in 2005, and it started in Melbourne. With family and friends, we collected surplus food, primarily from the Paran market, and the focus was on fruit, vegetables and protein. In that first year, just 600 kilograms was collected and it was delivered to local charities. This modest operation grew into SecondBite, a national food relief charity that has distributed in the last 20 years, over 175 million kilograms of food, equivalent to 350 million meals for free to our charity partners across Australia. Just under a year ago, we merged with an organisation called FareShare, which is based in Melbourne and Brisbane, and cooks nutritious meals that are made with love, packaged, and delivered also for free along with our produce. Together, we are working to make sure that all Australians have regular access to culturally appropriate, fresh, nutritious food, no matter where they live or what their circumstances. Now, Rotary's motto of service above self reflects the values that inspired SecondBite. The idea that each of us has something valuable to offer our community, whether it's times, skill or resources, it's about putting others first. Our impact has only been possible because of good people willing to give their time, their ideas and their passion. If it wasn't for Melbourne Rotary, we wouldn't have had this level of impact and perhaps at times, when the going got tough, the courage to continue. SecondBite has always been about people. This significant award that's about to be announced is a celebration of young people who, by their submissions, have shown just how much they care about sustainability and how important it is to work with others to make significant impact. So once again, thank you for choosing SecondBite as your recipient for the annual Environmental and Sustainability Lunch, and for working beside us for almost 20 years.
Thank you, Simone. Simone's an absolute inspiration to us here at Rotary with what she's achieved through SecondBite, and we're all really proud to be part of that journey with you. Thank you. I'd like to call the students and Mr. Ben Coleman from Epping, St Monica's College in Epping, to the stage, if I may. So these students are part of a much bigger group that call themselves the Enviro Friends from St Monica's College. And they're here today to accept the 2025 Rotary Sustainability Award. So on behalf of the Awards Committee, I congratulate the students of St Monica's, and I apologise, I have written down their names and I've forgotten and gone blank. But they're all worthy recipients of this award, and there is a much bigger team, but we couldn't get them all here today because a number of them have exams. So if you'd like to come a little bit forward here. Now, we do have a citation to read, but because we're running a bit late, I might break it down, if that's okay. I think I've got to do both of these. So, do you have the citation? Oh, okay, thank you. So, the Rotary Club of Melbourne Environmental Sustainability Award for 2025 recognises the distinguished service of St Monica's students: Teresa Lau, Shahab Singh, Nathan Muir, Amna Raza, Ira Patel, Hannah Cleary, Claire Joseph, Aman, thank you, Ben, and Chesna Fernando. And we have Aman, Chesna, Claire and Anna here today. Through this award, Rotary Melbourne recognises and applauds the St Monica's College students' willingness to put service above self with their important, inspiring and important project to explore ecological restoration, cultural learning, food sovereignty and nutrition with community engagement. Very ambitious project. The project is called Growing Country, Restoring the Land with First Nations Knowledge. It is a student-led environmental restoration initiative guided by the school's environmental team, Enviro Friends. Rooted in First Nations ecological knowledge, students immerse themselves in traditional land caring practices, learning directly from elders and cultural educators how to work the country rather than against it. Wetlands, grasslands and river corridors across both campuses have been targeted for regeneration through the introduction of locally indigenous plants and culturally significant bush tucker species. The students conducted flora surveys to map existing vegetation, soil types and hydrology. Through elder guidance, selected species that support each other, pollinators and local fauna, and created zoning plans to ensure microhabitats for specific areas and outcomes. Creating biodiversity and complexity, pollinators returned and they had specific success with the yam daisy, which is very impressive. And you'll see we've got a number of the student projects flowing through on the audiovisual, and the yam daisy one comes up there. So the Growing the Country projects exemplifies how education, culture and environmental science can intertwine to restore country, both ecologically and spiritually, through student passion, elder guidance and community collaboration. We are not merely planting seeds, but nurturing connections that will sustain country for generations to come. Congratulations.
Today, we stand in deep gratitude for this award and for the wisdom that has guided our work. Growing Country is more than a restoration project. It is a reconciliation in action. Through First Nations teachings, students have regenerated wetlands, grasslands, and river corridors, planting over 1,000 native seedlings, including culturally significant bush tuckers.
But beyond the soil and the seeds, we've cultivated something greater. A renewed respect for country, for knowledge that has sustained this land for a millennia.
The award prize money will be utilised for signage that will allow our community to learn of the cultural and ecological significance of the plants. We will continue to increase plant diversity in our planting areas and monitor the animals that visit our school grounds, as well as explore ways to utilise some of the bush tucker plants in our food and technology classes.
Together with elders, educators and the community, we're not just rebuilding habitats, we're restoring connections. This award honours not only our peers' dedication, but the legacy of stewardship we carry forward. Thank you for recognising that healing the land begins with listening to those who have always known how to care for it. Thank you.
I usually leave the speaking up to the students. They're much more eloquent than myself. I'll just briefly say that the support of my school's principal, Brian Handley OAM, has been comprehensive. He's fully committed to sustainability environment in the 35 years that he's been in this position. And since 2010, when I joined the school, we have seen a lot of growth happening in sustainability amongst the students. It's not separate to the curriculum. We incorporate the curriculum as much as possible. We have the STEM classes down in the wetlands, using drones, using Raspberry Pis that have been coded to monitor what birds are visiting our school grounds. And it's because of these projects that we were able to find that the powerful owl, a very large predatory bird in Melbourne that is threatened, visits our wetlands most evenings. And so we were able to make modifications to our planting and what rodenticides we use so that we could make sure that we were having a safe environment for these animals as well. Thank you very much for the awards today.
Thank you. I'd like to call Simone back to present the award.
Oh, thank you. Congratulations, everyone. So good to hear. Well done.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. You spoke very well.
I think our environmental future is in very good hands. I'd now call upon President nominee, soon to be President-elect, Carol Bond, to take over the rest of the meeting.
Rotarians, distinguished guests, and friends, it is my very great pleasure to introduce Fiona Simon as the CEO of the Australian Hydrogen Council. Fiona and I met during COVID on some interesting energy work that we were doing together. But the Australian Hydrogen Council is actually the peak body for the Australian hydrogen industry. Otherwise known as AHC, connects the hydrogen industry and its stakeholders in building a secure, clean, and resilient energy future that sustainably produces and uses hydrogen within the energy mix. AHC's members are from a range of sectors, including energy, transport, consulting, banking, and technology. Prior to joining the Australian Hydrogen Council as CEO, Fiona worked for close to 20 years in energy policy and regulation, specializing in energy retail competition and consumer protection matters. Fiona holds a Bachelor of Arts and a Doctor of Philosophy from the University of Melbourne. She has published a well-regarded academic book on retail energy regulation in Australia, and we look very much forward to her remarks today.
Well, hello everyone. It's such a pleasure to be here. I'm really thrilled to have been invited. So thank you to everyone. Thank you, President Catherine, and for that lovely introduction to my great friend Carol. I love Carol. She's wonderful. And I, a round of applause for Carol. And so I haven't really known much about her Rotary life. She doesn't sort of shout her wonderful way of living from the rooftops. And so I love that she's the president nominee. So that's wonderful. So anyway, thank you for having me. It is a pleasure to be here with a group just so committed to community service and sustainability. Rotary's got such a proud record, not just of recognising global challenges, and I've heard more about the work that Rotary does today, but of taking action locally and globally. And hydrogen requires that kind of attention, that same attention. It's a big picture, long game that becomes real through local action. Now, I'm going to talk about hydrogen now, and I'm not expecting any of you to be particularly au fait with what it is. I'll talk to you a bit more about what it means, but I will quickly give you a bit of a shorthand. When I say hydrogen, I also mean the things we make with it. So I mean where we talk about fuels and fertilisers like ammonia and methanol, these are made with hydrogen. We'll also be talking about using it for other commodities like green iron, but I'll explain a bit of that in a moment. So what I'm going to talk to you about today is about these molecules for the energy transition, because I do support the logic of electrifying wherever you can. It makes sense to get our renewables into the system and to use them as much as you possibly can. However, 80% of Australia's domestic energy consumption is in the form of molecules rather than electrons. We currently use molecules of natural gas and oil and coal, and these have the benefit of being able to be stored for a long period of time, days, years, millennia, and shifted over large distances, like overseas when we send LNG overseas. Molecules of hydrogen can do this too. We're talking about a gas here, or you can compress it into a liquid, and it can be done over a range of technologies. And this is where hydrogen comes into its own, where electrons in direct electricity or batteries can't solve the problem. Now, while many applications for molecules will shift to electrons, there's a significant portion of industrial activity that will not be covered by electricity. And hydrogen is the large-scale option to decarbonise energy that requires molecules. So here I'm talking about hydrogen to make methanol and ammonia for future shipping fuels, because that's what the maritime industry is talking about. How do we replace this filthy bunker oil? And what are our options? And at the moment, it's a sort of 50-50 bet about whether it's ammonia or methanol, and there's pros and cons for each. But you need hydrogen for both. It's an input for sustainable aviation fuels. Now, mostly people are talking about using biogenic feedstock for sustainable aviation fuels, so crops and the like. Waste. But you actually also need hydrogen to process the biofuels, and in other cases we can actually make e-fuels in the future for sustainable aviation fuel just with hydrogen. It has a role in long-haul road transport, very long-haul transport, where people are less inclined to think that a battery is going to solve the problem. And you can use it as long-term storage of electricity, and again, very long-term storage through Dunkelflaut, which is possibly my very, very poorly pronounced version of the German word, which is about a renewables drought, when you go for a long period of time when the sun hasn't shone enough and the wind hasn't blown enough. Now, hydrogen's not just about it being an energy carrier. It's also a chemical solution to decarbonisation, such as producing green iron. Green iron you then make into green steel. And green ammonia for fertiliser. Half the world survives, exists because nitrogen-based fertilisers. Hydrogen is the foundation for that. So electricity doesn't do those things. We also need to talk about molecules because of the ability for us to store them and send them overseas, because we are very fortunate in Australia to have all this opportunity to meet our own energy needs, but other partners of ours do not. So we talk a lot, for example, to Japan and to Korea, to Taiwan, countries that say, actually, we do need to import energy from somewhere else. So in Australia, we do have this opportunity. There's a need to create a vibrant hydrogen industry, both for our use and for the use of our partners. And this is recognised. We've had one of the first hydrogen strategies in Australia in 2019, and then a revised version was released last year. And we've seen significant investments announced by the Australian government and by states and territories, including a hydrogen production tax incentive that's been valued at $6.7 billion over 10 years, but is actually uncapped. The government's also invested in foundational initiatives to support the production of green iron and low-carbon liquid fuels. We've also seen a lot of the foundations for any green future being laid in the form of sustainable taxonomies for finance. And the public sentiment should be there too. So whether you choose to see the recent election announcement as a mandate for the current government or a concern about the alternative, if we choose to say this is a mandate for taking action, then we've got a strong mandate now for the federal government to move forward with a climate and clean industry pathway. So that's a window of opportunity, and it's one that we need to use well, but it will all take time. So unlike the global LNG market or the early solar industry, and these are two often used examples of how new industries develop over time, we actually need to create an entirely new market for clean and green hydrogen, with new forms of production, new ways to use it, a new end-to-end supply chain that's supported with an appropriately resourced ecosystem. So if we look at LNG and solar, even though we knew how to use the gas, the electrons, that they already had a home in the economy, it still took years to get those industries up. And with hydrogen, we also are aware that we don't have all the electrons just to draw on to make our hydrogen. We actually need to create an enormous amount of renewable energy to decarbonise our grid. There are sort of first and most important uses for renewable electricity. So we need to enable the transition within the electricity system, as well as providing for turning those electrons into the molecules for hydrogen. So all of this also requires electricity prices to be low, which they're not, and I'll come to that in a moment. So right now we know that we don't get to net zero without hydrogen. It's what you do, it's the no regrets pathway for the things you cannot electrify. But we don't get there if we don't have serious government support to kickstart the nascent industry, given that we haven't actually costed into the economy and therefore passed on to the private sector to manage the externality of carbon emissions. So with hydrogen, we talk about the commercial gap, and we should note that this is the gap between what it costs to make hydrogen now with first-of-a-kind, complex and integrated facilities without a market or an ecosystem, and we compare that against the cost of achieving the same energy or product outcome by relying on the established fossil fuel industry without a carbon price. So hydrogen is currently uncommercial, despite it solving one of the hardest parts of our energy transition, because we haven't actually valued yet sufficiently the solving of the problem. So that's why we're arguing for governments to invest in the industry to then draw through the private investment And we have seen these major funding announcements, but we're still in the period where they have not yet been paid. So we're still in this tricky time. And you might have noticed it has been a tricky time for hydrogen in these past months, at least compared to the previous few years of positive sentiment. And for a couple of months earlier this year, it seemed to be that we'd have weekly negative stories in the media of hydrogen projects delayed or put on ice. And it was also really challenging politically because we had competing claims being made frequently in the media as we were heading into the election about hydrogen. They were quite negative. So how do we get there from our peak of enthusiasm from a couple of years ago? Well, again, we knew the commercial gap existed, so that wasn't surprising, but it has actually been widening, unfortunately, rather than closing. And this is due to reasons that we had nothing to do with, that are global reasons, so rising equipment and construction costs, a high cost of electricity. And these have actually had an effect of cooling the ambition of some of the people who were previously enthusiastic about their business case for hydrogen. They go into a little bit more detail. In electricity, for example, in 2019-2020, the common understanding was that electricity would need to be around $20 a megawatt hour to get the cost of hydrogen production, because electricity was an input, low enough to develop these renewable hydrogen projects at scale. At the time, the prices were about twice that much, so at least $40 a megawatt hour, but the assumption was it would fall in the coming years. However, with COVID affecting supply chains, the war in Ukraine affecting gas prices, which affects electricity prices, with pressure on renewables for a variety of sources, coal generation plant retiring, we've actually seen electricity prices go the wrong way. And that gap down to $20 a megawatt hour is so much greater now. And those inflationary pressures, they've affected renewable projects, which is again the input to hydrogen, as well as hydrogen facilities. So we've seen blowouts in construction costs. We had politics enter the stage, as it does. Queensland had a change in government. There was a move to take back commitments for the state's largest hydrogen project. In South Australia, the government had to step in to save the steelworks that was tied to its main hydrogen project, and the money then that was to go to hydrogen and the development of that industry was then understandably reallocated. We've also seen an expected paring away of hydrogen projects and claims, and this is because people learn more. It's not only about the changing input costs, but also grappling with the technical complexity of these sorts of facilities. Again, they're complex, integrated and first of a kind. So planning and evaluation processes, they can uncover difficulties and costs that require a rethink on ambition, and all the more so when it's new, and that's what's been happening. It means the system's working. So many of us in the hydrogen space have understood that not every MOU, Memorandum of Understanding, not every MOU announced would result in a major project. Now, personally, that doesn't mean that my knowledge of that lessened my disappointment when we did hear about things falling over, but that was not practical to expect every single MOU to get up. So you could be forgiven for thinking that things are gloomy. I haven't meant to paint a gloomy picture, because it's actually not. It's better, but also a bit more complicated than that. Yes, we've seen a reduction in appetite for hydrogen projects, but that was from a pretty hyped up hype. We are still in the most prospective place we could be from a policy perspective. We've got the foundations being laid, the hydrogen production tax incentive is real, it's happening, and a Future Made in Australia agenda that calls out hydrogen and the things you do with it, like the green metals. And there are projects moving ahead. There continues to be appetite to do the necessary and difficult things. We're seeing the major players undertake the studies, to continue with the studies to say what makes sense, how do we take this forward? And they're learning by doing for the projects that are in operation. And smaller players are making headway as well. We've got hydrogen technology companies already sought after in the international market. And the fundamentals for hydrogen haven't changed. I think we've just been understanding more about them. We still need it for the energy transition. There still remains an enormous opportunity in Australia to generate renewable electricity, and more than we need, and then to produce more with that electricity, such as making hydrogen, to use it to produce ammonia and methanol, as well as exportable intermediate goods, such as iron and alumina. So this is all real. But what have we learned then to get to where we are now? Well, if we start with the obvious thing, it's that hydrogen's hard. And I've already outlined some of the reasons why. There's been a learning process that we've been undertaking. Most of the issues have been supply oriented. The reason hydrogen prices have been higher than expected has put some people off. But the real issue isn't as simple as the price for hydrogen is high, but also that end user willingness to switch processes at all or to pay any more. The certainty that others need for their own commercial operations and their timing that they need to adhere to. We really need to understand those things a bit better than we did. So we're learning more about why you need to start with the demand side, the very end-use markets, and then trace the path back to how you make it. Because we've learned that build it and they will come is not the way to get the industry up. What turns a promising pilot into a durable market is demand certainty. It's the long-term confidence that someone somewhere has a use and a reason to act. So our conversations are now turning to prioritising what we're trying to do. Not hydrogen for hydrogen's sake, but the means to the end. What's the end? Who wants it, by when, how they're going to pay for it, and what are the policy and the regulatory levers to pull to help that transition be made. So we take ammonia. We know that we need to decarbonise ammonia production for fertilisers and explosives. So this is our industry where we already need to make hydrogen. It's not an entirely new concept to replace something else. It's currently made with fossil fuels. So we need to decarbonise it, and that means engaging with those end markets. So let's talk agriculture for fertiliser and mining for explosives, understanding their drivers, their timelines and their budgets. What costs are the miners and the farmers, they're very separate entities, but I'm merging them for that sentence, what are they willing to absorb and how urgent is their need for change? What demand-side policy helps those markets transition? What's the right mix of carrots and sticks over time? Decarbonising shipping and aviation, at least the fuels used. For shipping, bunker fuel can be replaced, as I said, with methanol and ammonia. Sustainable aviation can be made, as I said, from biogenic feedstock with some hydrogen, or primarily hydrogen with some bio feedstock. These are really complex sectors, global shipping and global aviation, with market drivers, locations and price sensitivities that cover everything from tourism to bulk cargoes across a range of locations. At least there's some international regulatory frameworks, so for that I'm grateful. And as I said, hydrogen can decarbonise the process for producing iron from iron ore, and that meets a future need. It's not about the hydrogen, it's the steel makers able to make green, or at least greener, steel for their own customers. And about how they transition a business that relies on multi-billion-dollar, multi-decade lifestyle assets and make the case for change now so as not to be at odds with their customers in 20 years' time. So for us in hydrogen, the future demand-side measures in those other industries are the missing pieces for ours. Because in the absence of an external force, such as a mandate to buy greener products, it's pretty difficult for even the most climate-aware business to always choose a lesser-known technology or more expensive product. Because boards, as you know, need to demonstrate they're meeting their fiduciary duty to maximise profits, and business decision-making is often risk-averse. And I keep hearing it is particularly risk-averse in Australia. So we tend to look, more at governments to say, don't just rely on ESG, don't just rely on people's purported desire to do more. Look at mandates. Find mandates, look at the carrots and the sticks, because this is also a transition. You don't just hit people straight away, you help them find that path through. Now, it's also not just about one feedstock. You don't get to be a hydrogen person and not ever talk about renewable electricity, as you could tell already, or about that biogenic feedstock. There's a lot of mixes that come to play here in these futures that we're talking about. And it's about the mix that people will pay for now to get things going now. So I've learned at least, that being a purist may feel good, but an environment where you're doing everything from scratch, from production to storage and transportation and use in complex facilities, it's hard to actually guarantee the pure outputs at the right price and the right level of reliability for the person who needs it. And this is all the more when you're relying on renewable electricity, because we know it's seasonally dependent, weather and time dependent, and storage needs to be built. And when new equipment for any stage of this has not necessarily had enough hours, days or years of use for others to be certain about total life costs of equipment. So we're hearing more now about hybrids and blends, where dual fuel and blended options for ships and trucks can make sure that cargo can be transported to meet commercial requirements, even if there's a supply hiccup for the hydrogen, ammonia, methanol, etc., that was needed at the site. So it's not perfect, but it starts to get cleaner fuels being produced and used. And done properly, with the right regulatory and accountability mechanisms, we should avoid further fossil lock-in. We're also learning some really uncomfortable things about the need for cheaper fossil fuels right now to keep industries in Australia. And whilst it may seem contradictory for a body like mine to want cheaper natural gas prices for industrial use, it's a bit more complicated than that, because we're seeing industrial gas users shut up shop in Australia right now because they can't afford cheap enough gas for long enough to stay afloat. Prices for gas are too high and the contracts offered are much shorter than the industrial companies need to plan for their own future and to manage risk. And in a lot of cases, these are the companies that we would be expecting to decarbonise using hydrogen. But I won't go any further on that one. So where does Rotary come in? Well, obviously, Rotary's 7th area of focus of supporting the environment reflects a recognition that environmental stewardship is essential to lasting peace, health and prosperity. So you're already active in your communities, you're business leaders already, educators, engineers, scientists, volunteers. You know how to build trust, you know how to lead with values. So the energy transition, including hydrogen, does need that leadership. It needs Rotary's ability to connect across sectors, to convene difficult conversations and to support community action and policy shifts. You may not build the electrolyser or load the ship, but you can help fund a pilot project or lead a task force, or simply keep your community informed about what's real and what's hype. And I'd encourage you to stay engaged, keep hosting forums. Again, thanks for having me. Advocate for procurement policies that support low carbon materials. Mentor entrepreneurs working on decarbonisation solutions, and ask hard questions about how we prepare for economic shifts in regions that depend on emissions intensive industries. Because if hydrogen's going to succeed, it won't be because a few of us did it, it'll be because people like you made space for it in your communities and your conversations. So to conclude, there's great reason for optimism. And to the students in the room, feel optimistic, but help us. So pleased that you're here. This is going to be a hard and multi-year, multi-decade proposition to get to where we need to be, and we need to manage expectations. And in the meantime, hybrids, they're a way forward. And we're likely to see hydrogen developments and also ammonia, methanol, other hydrogen uses. They're going to go through phases. And there's still going to be some bad announcements, some sad announcements, as well as the good ones. So we need to hold the line and keep watching and keep plugging away. So I look forward to further conversations coming out of this event. I can feel Carol lurking, so I feel like I have gone well over time. So thank you so much for your forbearance. And I hope that with your ongoing support, we can grapple with the complexity and get to where we need to be a bit faster. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Fiona. It's a lot of technical language for
Sorry.
No, it's fine, for us to kind of wrestle with. But the thing that I think is so wonderful about you coming to speak to us today is that you've not given us a biased media viewpoint of what's actually going on, and you have given us reason to hope. So thank you so much. And we have a small gift for you. We have a bottle of wine made by one of our members, Trevor Hill, with the Yaring Vineyards. And we have some Australian-made, 200% Australian-made socks by our past president, Phil Endersby, right here in Melbourne. So thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Fiona, don't go away. Come back here. There's a very important activity we need to conclude, and that's to draw the raffle. And I'm going to ask Fiona to put her hydrogen hand into this barrel and pull out some numbers. We've got 1, 2, 3, 4. We've got 5 prizes. Last one first. This is the handmade table runner and placemat setting. Ticket number doesn't have a name on it, and the owner of this ticket may well be in the room. 669. Right. Look at your tickets. Yes, we've got a winner. Thank you, sir. The next prize is the composter, and that's ticket number 346. So must be in the room over there, yes. The Worm Farm, ticket number 633. That should also be in the room, I think. (633), there we go. And the next one is 199. Oh, goodness me. Somebody called Mary Barry. Mary, you're the winner of a night in the Sofitel, dear.
Hello? Let's get this one makes. All right.
This is for the bottle of... I'm tempted to put this back in and not read it out. Ticket number 614. I think it might have been sold today to a bloke called Bettini, who was actually selling the tickets. Tony, where is he? There he is. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. That brings us to the end. Thank you. Thank you to all of our visitors and guests for attending today. And if you want to hear more about Rotary Melbourne with a view to joining or seeing what else we do, please go to the website for some information. There's also a special thanks that we need to give today, and that is to the folk from the Sofitel. They've taken a table here today. It's wonderful to see them. They're great supporters of Rotary Melbourne. They also provided those canapes and drinks before today's meeting, and we're very, very pleased to be able to continue to meet at this wonderful establishment. Next week's meeting will be at our usual location, upstairs on number 35, featuring our two Vice Presidents, who will report on the year's projects and all of the activities. We hope you've enjoyed today's activity. You've learned a little bit, particularly about that stuff called hydrogen, Fiona, and we look forward to seeing you again on another occasion. And that brings the meeting to a close. Thanks very much.